All right. Our African unconscious, we have TieGuai, one of the Nine Immortals of Taoism. TieGuai, one of the Nine Immortals of Taoism, was an accomplished martial artist known as the Iron Staff Immortal. He lived during China's Golden Age. You're listening to African Immortal of Taoism, presented by Hakeem Alibokis Alexander on Spreaker, social podcasting, and Call-In, social podcasting, presented for World Reading Club in association with worldreadingclub.com, exercisingyourmind.com, and UniquilibriuM. This edition's reading focus comes to us from Our African Unconscious, The Black Origins of Mysticism and Psychology by Edward Bruce Bynum, Ph.D. We're going to be looking at and reading the section about China. It's short, and it gives a little bit of information about one of the Nine Immortals of Taoism, TieGuai, or Li TieGuai. And I'm putting this note here. There's not a whole lot of information about this online. Very few things point to this origin, and so this is a good note for this here. This is on page 56, Diaspora or the Great Dispersion, China. During the first millennium BCE, and even before, there were emergent and then submergent civilizations in the Middle East, China, and India, several of which were prior to the Aryans. An African presence is found in these early centers. Black Mongolian horsemen can be discerned in some of the sculptures and reliefs of the East. Some skeletal remains appear Africoid. While the African type has mostly faded away in China, it is significant to note that in the Chinese legends of divine dynasties, the first king of China, Fu Si, or Fu He, was described as black with woolly hair. He and his family are believed to have ruled from 2953 to 2838 BCE. An entire dynasty, the Shang dynasty, was described as ruled by blacks from 1766 to 1100 BCE. The Chu, who conquered them, described them as having black skin, and the Moso, with whom the Shang fought, described them as black men. One of the roots of this African extension into China is associated with the group of people and language family known as the Bak families. The language and people of the Bak, or Bak, B-A-K, right, immigrated into China around 2282 BCE to the banks of the Lo River in Shensi. Their leader was the legendary Yu Nai Huang Ti, a primary figure in Taoist philosophy. However, he was really a leader and represents a family of peoples. These peoples were racially and ethnically descended from the black populations of the Elamites and Akkadians of Mesopotamia. This is based on archaeological and philological data and has been quietly known for over a century. What is rather interesting is that these elements of Meso-Sumerian West Asian civilization who brought a well-defined socio-political structure, writing, philosophy, and economic processes to China, also brought a system of moral and ethical and spiritual philosophy that is at the root of diverse mystical systems. By 2000 BCE, the Xia dynasty had texts in which aspects of the I Ching, or Book of Changes, could be found. Elements of the pre-cuneiform writing style of the Meso-Sumerians of Mesopotamia can be discerned. The I Ching shows a striking similarity to certain fragments of texts from the library of Ashurbanipal, where it is identified with the ancient king of Sippar in Mesopotamia. This text of the antediluvian king Enmedaranki, or so-called Tablet of Destiny, was found around the present-day area of Iraq and is believed by many to be the root or even identical to the Great I Ching. The original text of the Tablet of Destiny is thought to have been composed in 2800 BCE. When we discuss the African mystical and religious systems, we will see how this I Ching, with its binary system of 64 permutations or hexagrams, is intimately associated with the system of the Mesopotamian Essene sects and the West African system of Ifa. Needless to say, the I Ching has profoundly influenced Chinese thought and civilization, but this influence is also echoed in the other spiritual traditions of China. If one looks at the tight curly hair and many of the facial features of the early representations of the Buddha, they are quite African in appearance, as are the figures and early representatives of the South Indian Krishna and Mahavira of the Jains. Indeed, the martial arts first appear in China around 1500 BCE, but do not become well known until they are taught to the Shaolin monks in southern China by the monk Bodhidharma, aka Talmo, an Indian of Dravidian ancestry. He, like TieGuai, was a great teacher. Talmo was the founder and first patriarch of Qian, or Zen Buddhism, who introduced the foundations of the martial arts to the Shaolin monks of southern China's Songshan province. Born in 440 CE in the southern Indian kingdom of Pallava, he lived in one of the oldest cities, Kanchi. His integration of martial techniques, breathing exercises, and philosophy of qi energy helped establish Shaolin Chuanfa, or temple boxing. These and innumerable other facts and artifacts document a distinct African presence in ancient China and ancient Asia that had a profound influence on the development of that civilization. It is not that China was a black civilization, not at all, only that it had elements of an African presence at the foundation, genetic and psychic, just as did the civilizations of Mesopotamia. TieGuai, one of the 9 Immortals of Taoism. TieGuai was an accomplished martial artist known as the Iron Staff Immortal. He lived during China's Golden Age. I'm going to see if I can find an image of it, because he really looks like a black dude here in the image that I have in this book, which is Our African Unconscious, The Black Origins of Mysticism and Psychology by Edward Bruce Bynum. A great book if anybody wants to study more about history and mysticism. It's a fantastic read. And there's also something that I want to say about that I learned of years ago. There was a Chinese geneticist who was attempting to distinguish that the Chinese had completely evolved and developed independently from all of the races in the world, and wanted to show that the Chinese were a distinct race that developed independently from all of the races in the world, and actually discovered that they were mostly descendants of Africans. So let's see, Chinese geneticists discovered African genes in China. Let me see if I can pull that up here on Google. Chinese roots lie in Africa, research says. This is from the Los Angeles Times, September 29th, 1998. The headline here, or 1998, it says most of the modern population of China has its genetic origins in Africa, according to research released today. Let's see. Let's take a look here. This is from the Los Angeles Times by Robert Lee Hotz. It says most of the population of modern China, 1/5 of all the people living today, owes its genetic origins to Africa, an international scientific team said today in research that undercuts any claims that modern humans may have originated independently in China. In the search for human origins, in which political beliefs and pride of place can figure as prominently as fossil evidence, the genetic findings dramatically illustrate the intricate weave of prehistoric migrations and human evolution, the scientist said. Published today in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences, the study is the product of the Chinese Human Genome Diversity Project, a consortium of 7 major research groups in the People's Republic of China, and the Human Genetics Center at the University of Texas Health Science Center at Houston. It was funded by the National Natural Science Foundation of China. So detailed genetic profiles created. I'm not going to read through the rest of that right now, but I'm going to put the link in the show notes here on Spreaker and possibly on Callin. But that's it for now. African Immortal of Taoism, TieGuai, or Li TieGuai. You've been listening to African Immortal of Taoism, Li TieGuai, presented by Hakeem Ali Bokus Alexander on Spreaker Social Podcasting and Callin Social Podcasting, presented for World Reading Club in association with worldreadingclub.com, exercisingyourmind.com, and UniquilibriuM. This edition's reading focus came to us from our African Unconscious, The Black Origins of Mysticism and Psychology by Edward Bruce Bynum, Ph.D., and is sponsored by The Blog Dealer. Go to blogdealer.com to find your health, fitness, and fat reduction products. Until next time, World Reading Club.